Retro Road Test, 1991 Ford Sierra vs 1991 Volkswagen Passat. In the early 90s, for the discerning motorist seeking a capable, comfortable, and affordable family car, few choices loomed larger than the Ford Sierra and the Volkswagen Passat. Both were stalwarts of their respective manufacturers, representing slightly different philosophies in design and execution. With the Sierra nearing the end of its production run and the Passat moving into a more modern era, 1991 proved an especially fascinating time to compare these two family saloons. We took both out on a variety of roads, from the motorway to the winding B roads, to see how they stacked up. Styling and design. The Ford Sierra, launched back in 1982, was a bold move at the time, with its smooth aero styling that divided opinion. By 1991, though, the Sierra's shape had mellowed into a familiar sight. Updates over the years had kept it fresh, but it was clear the basic silhouette was getting on a bit. Nevertheless, there's an undeniable charm to its gently curving lines, and the 1991 facelift, with clear indicators and body-colored bumpers on higher trim levels, gave it a more mature, refined look. The 1991 Volkswagen Passat, on the other hand, was from an entirely different school of thought. Gone were the angular lines of the B2 model. The B3 Passat, launched in 1988, had a rounded, almost bulbous design. It was a significant departure from traditional Volkswagen conservatism. While some found it a bit slab-sided, there's no denying the Passat looked modern and aerodynamically efficient. The lack of a traditional grille was especially striking. Overall, the Sierra had a certain old-school charm, whereas the Passat looked like it belonged to the incoming decade. Whether one preferred the Sierra's rakishness or the Passat's Bauhaus simplicity ultimately comes down to taste. Interior and comfort. Slip inside the Ford Sierra, and you're greeted by a cabin that, while functional, feels decidedly 80s. Hard plastics abound, and while the ergonomics are largely sound, there's little in the way of flair. Ford's trademark chunky switchgear is in evidence, and while it all feels robust, it lacks the sense of occasion you might hope for. That said, the Sierra's seats are comfortable and supportive, especially in higher trims like the Gear. There's plenty of room in both front and rear seats, although rear headroom is somewhat compromised by the sloping roofline. Boot space, too, is generous for the class. The Passat offers a different story. Volkswagen had really stepped up its game with interior quality, and while the Passat's dashboard is hardly adventurous in its design, everything feels solid and well-engineered. Soft touch materials in key areas give it a more premium feel than the Sierra. Seating is excellent, with ample support for long journeys, and thanks to the Passat's boxier proportions, there's a little more headroom and boot space than in the Ford. Both cars offer good ventilation and heating, though the Passat system is particularly powerful, an important consideration for chilly British mornings. On the road. This is where the Ford Sierra really comes into its own. Ford had spent much of the 1980s perfecting the Sierra's chassis, and by 1991, it showed. Even in basic forms, the Sierra offered a level of steering feel and chassis balance that few competitors could match. There's a real sense of connection through the wheel, and whether cruising or pressing on, the Sierra feels alive in your hands. Our test car, a Sierra 2.0 IGLS, was equipped with the 2.0-liter DOC engine producing around 123 bhp. Paired with a slick 5-speed manual gearbox, the Sierra felt sprightly enough, managing 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 9.6 seconds. It pulls well from low revs, and though it's not the most refined unit at high speeds, it's perfectly suited for brisk British motoring. The ride quality, too, is excellent. The Sierra glides over rough surfaces with aplomb, never feeling crashy or unsettled, even on poorer B roads. The Volkswagen Passat counters with a slightly different approach. The chassis is more about composure and refinement than driving thrills. The steering is lighter and less communicative than the Sierras, but it's precise enough. Body control is impressive, with very little roll through corners, but the Passat never encourages the same kind of enthusiastic driving. Our Passat 2.0 GL test car, fitted with Volkswagen's venerable 2.0-litre 8-valve engine, produced 115 bhp. Performance was similar to the Sierra on paper, with a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of just over 10 seconds, but the delivery was more relaxed. The engine was smoother and quieter at motorway speeds, making the Passat the better long-distance cruiser. The ride is supple, although sharper bumps do sometimes catch it out. The trade-off for the Passat's superior refinement is a slightly more aloof driving experience. Running costs. When it comes to everyday costs, both cars are fairly evenly matched, but with subtle differences. The Ford Sierra's engines are tried and tested, and parts availability is excellent in Britain. Routine maintenance is straightforward, and independent garages are familiar with Ford mechanicals. Fuel economy for the 2.0-litre Sierra is reasonable, averaging around 30 miles per gallon in mixed driving. Insurance groups are modest, though slightly higher than the equivalent Passat. Volkswagen's reputation for reliability is well-founded, and the Passat should prove robust over high mileages. The 2.0-litre unit is known for its durability, and corrosion protection is markedly better than the Sierras, an important consideration for long-term ownership. Fuel economy is a touch better too, with an average of 30–34 miles per gallon not being unusual. However, parts for the Passat can be a little more expensive, and servicing at Volkswagen dealers typically costs more than at Ford equivalents. Independent specialists are available but fewer than for Ford. Practicality. Both the Sierra and the Passat are properly practical family cars. The Sierra's hatchback version, available across most trim levels, offers supreme versatility, with a huge load bay and a split folding rear seat. The Passat, available as a saloon or estate, is less versatile in saloon form but offers a simply cavernous boot, deep, wide, and easy to access. The estate version, meanwhile, is a load lugger par excellence, arguably the best in its class for the period. Interior storage is good in both cars, with decent-sized door bins, glove compartments, and center console storage. The Passat just edges it in terms of space utilization, thanks to its boxy, squared-off dimensions. Equipment and value. Both cars in 1991 came reasonably well equipped by the standards of the time, though it depends heavily on trim level. The Sierra 2.0 IGLS features electric front windows, central locking, a decent stereo, and, in some cases, ABS. Air conditioning remained a rare option in Britain and was mostly reserved for the gear models. The Passat 2.0 GL offered similar kit, with central locking, electric windows, a better quality stereo, and a well-laid-out dashboard. Some models also featured ABS and driver's airbags, a rarity in 1991 and a significant tick in the Passat's favor in terms of safety. Prices when new were close. The Sierra typically undercut the Passat slightly at list price, but Volkswagen's stronger residuals meant the Passat retained more of its value after a few years. Reliability. By 1991, both cars had ironed out many of the niggles associated with earlier models. However, the Ford Sierra did have a few issues that prospective buyers needed to be aware of, rust being chief among them, particularly around the wheel arches, sills, and rear hatch. Electrical issues could crop up too, though generally speaking, the mechanical components were bulletproof. The Passat's main Achilles heel was its complex front suspension, which could wear prematurely and lead to costly repairs. However, if maintained properly, the Passat had the edge for long-term durability. Interior trim on Volkswagens from this era was particularly resilient compared to the often squeaky, rattly Ford fittings. Conclusion: choosing between the 1991 Ford Sierra and the 1991 Volkswagen Passat ultimately comes down to what you value most in a family car. The Ford Sierra is the driver's choice, lively, involving, and surprisingly comfortable. It may be getting on in years by 1991, but it remains a delight to drive, and the hatchback versatility gives it an edge for practicality. The Volkswagen Passat is the rational choice, quieter, more refined, more solidly built, and likely to last longer without major issues. It's a superb motorway car, and in estate form, it's practically unbeatable for carrying capacity. If your heart rules your head, the Sierra's charms are hard to resist. But if you're playing the long game, and particularly if you value build quality and understated competence, the Passat edges it. In truth, both cars show why the early 90s were such a golden era for sensible, engaging, and genuinely useful family motoring. Either would still make a fine classic by today.